Hello and welcome to Her Drive podcast. This is the podcast that focuses on female founders, creators, healers, and just general human beings out there that have inspirational stories and something that's kind of unique that they offer out to the rest of humanity. And today's guest is no different. Her name is Jessica Lynn, MBA. She is an Amazon #1 best-selling author of The Truth About Being a Woman in Construction and is the CEO and founder of Pivot Hire. So hello, Jess. Welcome to Her Drive. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Well, first and foremost, I feel like the thing that jumps out is like a woman in construction. We rarely see that as far as, I drive through past construction sites all the time and we don't really see women. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what has your role in construction been? What brought you into that? And then of course we'll dive into all the other things that are happening within your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So construction has kind of always sort of been threaded throughout my life, even from like an early age. I was free labor for my father and mother, working on residential construction, cutting grass, pretty much anything that needed to be done. I was put to work. So from an early age, I learned different skill sets very quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't something I had entertained as a career path. It was actually something I stumbled on in high school when I was a bad kid skipping class. I had a friend of mine, she was taking welding courses, and she's like, yeah, come in. You can hide in the welding booth. Nobody will see you. And of course, she's like, here, put this thing on your head. And it was a welding hood, and flipped it down. She stroked her arc, striked her arc, and that was it. That was first love for me, was welding. And so from that point, I just really made it a mission of exploring what that could be, what that could look like. And from there, that really took me through kind of a windy road of welding, auto mechanics, fabrication, and then eventually construction management. And then from that point, I really started to explore other opportunities of like, what else can I do with these skill sets? Can I do more? And then ultimately went in the direction of an MBA and doing a lot of stuff associated with that even.
So interesting to watch the timeline, right? Looking back of that one pivotal moment. And what do you think it was about welding that struck you as something interesting?
I think it was kind of almost like a semi fascination, at least in that initial moment of like this surreal thing that was happening in front of me. And I didn't quite understand what it was, but I wanted to. And then from that, it became this ability of doing something, building something with my hands, like even fabrication, working on hot rods, being able to take this old, beautiful car and really bring it back to life, or working on different pieces and parts of a bus, like knowing that these things are every day and other people touch it but don't necessarily look at it in the same way. So it was just really amazing to see those things come to life.
Hmm. And for those who don't know what fabrication is, what does that mean?
So fabrication can actually mean several different things, but in this context, it's basically taking, if you will, sheets of metal or pieces and parts of a vehicle and using kind of metal working skills. It could be a hammer, it could be a grinder, to really reshape or form these pieces so that they are either refinished, so the polished, looking nice and new again so you can paint it, or even bending it or molding it into like interesting shapes or designs that are fit for manufacturing and so on. It's kind
Yes.
of a very rough explanation, but hopefully it paints a visual.
Yeah. I think that's relatively easy to understand. Amazing. So, in moving through these different paths, and excuse me, what made you want to get an MBA?
Actually, interesting enough, the MBA was something I had toyed around with for a few years when I was working as a construction manager. And part of it was understanding that there were aspects of business working in construction industry that I just wasn't fully understanding or feeling like I had the right exposure to. So that was a piece of it. And then the other part was recognizing that I wanted to move into sustainability. So it's like, well, how can I do that? Because everything up to that point hadn't really carved out the exact path I had envisioned. And then the third piece was actually, as a woman in male dominated space, feeling the need to have something to reinforce my knowledge. And so kind of pulling those things together, that's really what helped me, pursue the MBA and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to invest in ourselves, and we're going to take the risk and try to open up some new doors.
Got it. Okay. It makes perfect sense. And it's so interesting to me to hear the one of the reasonings being I'm in a male dominated industry, and it kind of translates to me, in order for me to like prove myself or be taken more serious, I have to get this advanced degree to get respect. And did you notice that people who didn't have MBAs, who were men, were given respect without having it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were there are several examples, but definitely throughout my career, right? Whether it was as a welder working with different men, I would watch them get paid more. I would watch them literally get kudos for my accomplishments, things that I had designed, whether it was a process or an idea, all the way to, as a construction manager, like being on a site with mostly men and then having to literally explain to them, this is the process, here's the resource, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it. And then most often being told, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Or worse, dealing with more physical abuse or verbal abuse coming from different individuals. So there seems to be a very consistent theme with kind of the, what's the right way to phrase it? Kind of double standard of being a woman. And even though I was very much like knowledgeable and had this expertise to bring to the table, I still saw people either that I worked directly with or even reported to quickly dismiss certain aspects of me, whether it was sexism, ageism, because they looked at me and thought, oh, she's super young. It's like, yeah, but I started my career very young too. So it's like I have all of these robust experiences to bring to the table. So absolutely, even in a previous role as a director, I very much witnessed the same things where there were men who were either at my level or above me, and they would get credit or get recognized for things, but it seemed like no matter what I did, it was either too much or too little or too quiet. Like there was never a perfect balance. So there's always kind of this haunting of working harder to prove oneself and never quite sure if it's going to be enough.
That sounds like a very frustrating space to be in continuously.
It is. It is. But I think it's also made me a really great advocate at the same time. I feel like I have been able to use the privilege that I've built to this point in my life to reach behind me or beside me and help, especially other women around me, and say, here's some resources, here's a path based on, here's the lessons I have taken, and let me help you navigate what next could be. So yes, but also I'm really good at throwing elbows and not taking no very well. So I think I'm well suited for most of those instances.
Interesting. But do you think that you were naturally that way? Like I'll use the word scrappy, like scrappy-ish and like not taking no, or was being within this male dominated spaces form you into that?
I definitely think there has always been a level of grit that I have brought. I mean, I was a very rough and tumble young woman. There are things I got into, and again, kind of referencing even back in high school, I was getting in trouble, and there were things around my childhood that kind of created those circumstances where I had to be rough, just because of my family setting or where I lived. So there was always kind of those pieces there. And then even my mom likes to talk about when I was like a few months old, I would be so stubborn and mad. I would literally like hold my breath and pass out. And the doctor told her, he was like, she is going to be a very hard-headed individual, so watch out. So I think there's always been a piece of that, but also there's an additional layer to it that has to be built in, of identifying like, this is the space, this is how it is. Okay, this is what I need to do to kind of put my armor on and go to work.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. And where was your mindset at in the beginning? And then how did it begin to shift? Because I imagine through this process, you're also doing some self-exploration and expansion. So I'm curious, what was that like, and from where you began, maybe middle process, and then to where you are now?
Yeah, that was definitely a journey, like thinking in terms of even welding. Like there was an assumption in myself of I can't do better because I'm too dumb, not good at math, or I'm not book smart. Like there's definitely those voices that I had in my head. But then as I continued to take these new risks and explore and again kind of push my way through really hard circumstances, I was able to develop a level of confidence
Mm-hmm.
and even reflection. So welding for 8 years, and then I moved into construction management for 4. During the time of construction management, there was so much that I quickly was able to grasp or understand, which again kind of built the confidence. But also, I just got tired of being told, like, no. And it's like,
Mm.
but watch me. And so that stubbornness definitely kicked in where I would continue to seek out new opportunities, explore, learn something new, all the way to when I was doing my MBA, a lot of the challenges I was facing prior being told like, oh, this isn't right or getting in trouble, I actually got confirmation during the MBA, like, no, this is absolutely what you're supposed to do.
Mm.
And so the MBA really did become a catalyst for me in many ways to reinforce those practices that I was internally building or understanding and then turn around and apply afterwards.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I know those negative voices that we all have, to varying degrees. So, was there any specific practice outside of, reinforcing through stubbornness and getting a higher education? Were there any other factors that played into shifting away from those voices?
Definitely have to give credit to my mom. She has been one of my biggest cheerleaders. We both have had issues, right, throughout the years, but she has always been there for me throughout my experience. Like there's definitely been some dark moments, and we basically have pulled together our resources and supported each other throughout the year. So even though mother daughter, I would like to give credit to, there was eventually a switch in where we became kind of like best friends, where there was like a mutual understanding and appreciation for where each of us were at. And then of course just, I've had some really wonderful mentors along the way. Again, like the not taking no, that was always a big one. And then therapy. Like I know that we don't really talk about that as much as we probably should, but I have really appreciated the ability to go to a therapist throughout my life to process and reflect and understand, like, am I internalizing this? Should I be internalizing this? Why am I going down a rabbit hole? And sometimes it's even just being able to take a step back and breathe and evaluate with the right tools mentally to clear my mind and see what is next.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I think having a strong support system, key, right? But then also having someone who's not invested in your life in a super personal way, right? Where your life decisions are really impacting them. So having that therapist, coach, whatever, can
Mm-hmm.
really leap you forward in a big, big way. And I think having those resources are so critical. And I am a huge advocate of therapy, coaching, programs, mindfulness, yoga, like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
people need to go internal and dig through some and sifting around. I love it. I think it's phenomenal. And I love that that's been a part of your toolbox as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the book that you've written. Can
Yes.
you illuminate a little bit more about it?
Sure. Yeah. So the book is basically, I like to call it a call to action for the construction industry, but also really male dominated spaces. So in essence, it really is kind of memoir, semi biography of, where I started. It does talk about my childhood in a little bit more detail, how I got into welding, and then eventually through the MBA to my most recent role as a director and now a founder of my own small social enterprise. So it highlights that, but then it goes into another layer of those different challenges that I faced as a woman. And I know that other women and minority groups have also experienced. So it's really that call to action of like, we are not going to ignore this anymore. Like, here's the facts. Like, we are experiencing this. Now, what are we going to do to fix it? Because
Hmm.
I know personally, I'm kind of over talking about it, and I'm now a place of like, okay, now we're going to do something about it.
Brilliant. So, what are some of the pain points for women and minorities within these male dominated industries?
Well, I highlighted it a little bit in the beginning, which is the theme of being too much to something. I
Mm.
again like being able to show up to a meeting, whether you're too quiet, too loud, too organized, not organized enough. Like there never seems to be a perfect balance of you, the individual. And so it's like, I think that is a big piece of it. And the other part is just being able to show up in those spaces as an individual to do the job, to have access to training, to be able to be on a job site and not be in fear of your safety. Like I remember very early on, even when I was doing my welding classes at night, there was these stories I was being told about women literally being killed or severely injured on job sites because tanks would be dropped or tools would be messed with. And so that is still a very lived reality today of many women and minority groups. Like we show up on a job site and there's potential for harassment. If you're a part of the union, you might be sat on a bench because of a myriad of reasons, or you might get to a point where somebody's actually harassing or assaulting you on site, but you're afraid of saying something because you might lose your job. And so there's definitely kind of this mixed, again, kind of double standard of how we can show up on a job site and the expectations within the environment that we are expected to continue to work in.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious from the, and pardon my ignorance on this subject, but for why would you, if you're in a union, be placed like just benched basically rather than being able to work? I know different, every state is a little bit different, but I just assume if one state has like union workers, isn't everyone required within that cohort? Or I don't know the proper language.
No, you're good. So you're right. It does differ state by state, and sometimes it even differs based on the company.
Mm.
So there are obviously some states that are more pro-union versus others. So without getting too much into because there is a political aspect of it, there are some union halls, again, depending on how they operate, who knows who, there are folks that they will deem not work ready or worthy. And so, for whatever reason, again, there's a lot of isms that can be brought into that conversation.
Hmm.
And so they'll basically use the system of like, oh, well, we're just going to keep you on the bench because we've got so and so, or they'll keep picking other people over them. And so there's not really an equal path for those individuals to get put on a job site or on a project. And so it kind of comes into, well, what can you do? Am I doing something wrong? And then you start to internalize those aspects. So yes, in theory there are people that are put on a bench because they aren't work ready or worthy of a project, but at the same time it's also used as a tool to punish certain individuals because of insert whatever bias or ism that could be in place at that moment.
Got it. So if they're kind of isolated in that way, I imagine
Mm-hmm.
the mental emotional torment that eventually it creates would cause them, some people, to just leave. Is that the
Yeah.
goal?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, basically it shoves them out the door, and it also messes with their income. Like if they're not working, they're not making money.
Right.
So yeah, it messes with their livelihood, which doesn't feel good. And again, that's someone else having power and control over an individual or a group.
Right. The fuckery. That's just fuckery to me.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And yeah.
And then the idea, because I've been harassed many times in workplaces, and I've never been shy about it. But also, I mean, these have been situations where I'm like, either they do something about it, or there's a lawsuit that's coming, or I'm gone. So why
Mhm.
isn't that taken more serious in these types of spaces?
Oh goodness, that is an excellent question, and I would love to dig in deeper with many other folks about the topic. But I would say, at least from my perspective, again, there's a political aspect to it. But I think it's because there's so few women, especially and minority groups that are actually in the spaces, the status quo, if you will, that continues to exist. It's like, okay, we're just going to keep doing as is. And if you don't like it, then you can go away. Like there definitely is a very loud and existing good old boys club, and because that continues to have such deep roots in these male dominated spaces, it really does kind of set the standard of, well, you don't have thick enough skin, or you just don't belong, or again, the to this to that.
Mm.
And because of that, and those who own, again, kind of owning the subcontractors, the general contractors, the money, right, that influence continues to maintain a certain standard. I'm going to use that term loosely, standard within those certain expectations.
Got it. So it sounds to me like the only solution is for money to be transferred into capable hands of people who have a higher expanded awareness of being a human, like humanity.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Last year, I made a big decision. And the first was to commit to starting a whole new business and then ramping up production of this very podcast. It was definitely an exciting time. My creativity was flowing and my brain was on. But the downside was I couldn't sleep, and waking up feeling rested was becoming quite an issue. I found myself reaching intermittently for unhealthy energy sources and knew that that just was not sustainable for my ultimate optimized health and wellness. And that's when I started to figure out that there's this idea of mental wealth. Mental wealth is about creating habits that build your resilience, like investing in your future self. Of course, we know about sleep, diet, exercise, and stress management, but most of us aren't aware of smart tools like exogenous compounds that can really play a sharp role. One of those tools I found is Magic Mind. Magic Mind's focus shots have been a lifesaver for my mornings, giving me clean energy without the jittery crash. And at night, their sleep shots help me actually wind down so I can get the kind of rest that fuels my creativity. And this has not been about a quick fix or a magic solution. It's really just enhancing what I'm already doing in my healthy life choices. Since I've added Magic Mind to my routine, I feel so much more balanced. I'm sharper when I need to focus, and I'm actually getting some deep sleep that my busy mind and body deserve. And now they've bundled these amazing shots into a 24-pack so you can experience the same flow from day to night. And to my audience, the beautiful Magic Mind is offering 45% off their 24-hour pack. So you can go ahead and head to www.magicmind.com/herdrivejan, spelled Jan, to grab yours and join me in building your mental wealth this year. And before we sign off, don't forget to check the link in the description to get that exclusive discount. Here's to you feeling rested, focused, and ready to crush your goals in this beautiful year of 2025.
If you had like a magic wand and you could make shifts with your wand, what would you do?
Honestly, I think it would be to increase the pathway for individuals to actually own construction and related companies. Because again, money is power. I know that, there's, different sides of the coin of that argument. But if you have money, it means you have authority, which means you have power. And so I am excited to see this happening, but it's slowly happening, is seeing more women, more minority owned businesses that are really coming into power, into ownership, to establish and create these spaces so that individuals can have a career path. They can have these safe spaces to show up authentically, no matter how they, live their life. If they're queer, if they're, woman or other, like having that access and that ability. And then through that, I feel like there's just going to be this beautiful melting pot of innovation and understanding. And honestly, we could probably do a whole lot better about getting our projects built. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of, I think, like studies, but then just real life scenarios and situations where it's shown that women, we tend to manage quite a bit better, right? I'm going to just cut myself off there. But yeah, like I, for a summer, I was with an ex-partner and we were going to start a roofing company. And I didn't know anything about the roofing industry. So I decided with my free time, I would spend that summer learning, going and working for roofers. And it was filled with men. And I worked for two different companies. One was like metal, and then the other was just like your standard materials. And no one I didn't feel off or mistreated, but I think it was because it was like a sales position. It wasn't really like on the job site working next to the men. And so I imagine there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think that even goes into representation as well. Like there's definitely the bias of, oh, you're just on the sales team, what do you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's always like insert, right? But then I think the other piece is representation, like being able to show up on a job site, whether you're a salesperson, the person taking the roof shingles up to the top of the roof or whatever, having the ability to turn around and look and see, different folks on a site, not like a very specific gender or, demographic. I think that also creates a mindset of inclusion, like being able to show up and asking questions as a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should be able to do that and not feel like, oh, I'm being judged or getting those looks or, oh, well, go away. You're wasting my time. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge learning opportunity for you to get something from them, but also them to get something from you. And the fact that that door gets quickly shut because
Yeah.
of whatever bias or assumption it's unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been very lucky. Like I worked in the trucking industry, like my first job out of college, and then this like roofing stint when things fell apart with the ex, so we never moved forward fully with the company. But the way that I've always approached these spaces is with a lot of confidence and like I'm here to learn, but also note that we're feeding each other. Like without sales and without the understanding that you're providing here to me, I'm not giving you these jobs to move forward, right? So, we have to work together. And that's where I think like collaborative mindset is really helpful coming from, a more female leaning person on the spectrum versus the masculine old way, the old dynamics that have served humanity in a shitty way for a very long time. So I love where you're headed. And now you're not just like to hear you say, I'm done talking about it. Now we need action. Like, let's go. So to me, that makes perfect sense. Like you can preach, you can preach, you can preach. And at some point, let's shift the dynamic and we do it through these sets of standards and obviously through companies created by others or putting
Yes.
people into leadership positions where there actually can be a shift. And I think at the end of the day, like those who don't agree are going to go kicking and screaming and eventually they'll fizzle out because I don't think people really want to work with human beings like that at the end of the day. It's not a fun
No.
environment to be in. And if you're in that old narrative of like, I don't know, I feel like men, when they're around each other, they're like bullying and picking on each other. And it's like, I like you, so I'm going to pick on you. But then they also are picking on the weakest link as well. And it's like, I don't know, it just seems unhealthy to me. So I am curious about, with all that being said, I went on a little tangent. You have a new endeavor, Pivot Higher. I would love to talk a bit about what that is and what inspired you to create it.
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point about action, I'm tired about just talking about things. So we actually recently are rebranding to Pivot Higher Plus. And so our focus is women and non-binary who are interested in getting into the construction trades, career changers, and or even trying to find their path into the clean energy transition. So thinking renewables.
Mm-hmm.
What we've done is we've moved away from kind of the traditional coaching model. So thinking coaching, consulting, recruiting,
Mm-hmm.
and decided it's actually more accessible to go into a resource hub. So that's what we're moving into is a resource hub. So individuals can come to our website. They can quickly like click on one of our partners, which is an additional resource for them to connect to, grow their network. At the same time, we can help individuals with mapping out next steps because in my own experience and even the conversations I've had with others, it can be very overwhelming and daunting that starting point, whether it's like, well, I am curious about doing this trade, but I really don't know where to go or who to talk to, or, oh, I have this job where I sit at a desk all day, but I'm just not passionate about it. And I'm really enjoying my woodworking classes, all the way to kind of my own experience of, okay, I worked as a construction manager, but I really want to do something related to sustainability. Again, where do I start? And so that's where we're trying to come in and enable individuals, whether it's a simple package of resources, expanding their network, or again, working with different organizations to help them, with getting grants or partnering with grants. And then again, working together as different resources, like a braid. Like each one of us is a strand in the braid coming together to fill those gaps.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. So for those who are looking to pivot into various industries, their first step would be to come visit you all.
Yes, I would highly recommend it, because even if it's just a 15-minute conversation, sometimes having that space to, I don't want to say vent, but to have a sounding board, or even just raise your hand and say, like, I really don't know who to talk to. Mm-hmm. And that's where we can help open the door, literally, to say, have you heard of this organization? Or, hey, let me introduce you to so-and-so from my network. They're currently looking for, or are currently working as. And so then you can start that conversation of, here's an informational interview, or here's some more details about that potential opportunity that I think I want to pursue.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So for any of these people who are coming forward, what are some words of advice that you may start with, or you would love to start with? If someone's like, this is what I'm thinking about doing, just in a general term. Is there anything that you think is vital to be known?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind. And the first one is, especially, I'm going to say this specifically for women, is don't let fear keep you paralyzed. Mm. Like, we as women, especially, whether we're applying for jobs or working on a project or trying to do a stretch assignment or learning a new skill, we seem to hesitate to put ourselves out there until we can do that one thing 110%. So some wise advice that I heard another woman say is, raise your hand and figure it out as you're raising your hand. So again, don't let fear paralyze you. Actually use it as a way to energize yourself. Maybe you need to take a day, take a deep breath, clear your mind, but use that to figure out that next step, just that next step.
Yeah.
And then as far as for individuals who, kind of thinking very simply here, might be interested in the trades, check out your state. See if there's a career force or career center. They're not perfect, but it still could be a really good starting point as far as at least asking questions, striking up conversations, or even looking to see if there's a free class you could take so that you could explore if you want to go into welding, want to go into plumbing, or even going into trucking. There are opportunities out there. Again, it can just be really difficult and overwhelming to figure out, does your local county do something, or if there's a federal program nearby. So that's kind of the two little things that I would throw out there.
Yeah. I think that's a really solid and helpful. Well, if you could go back and give a younger you some words of advice, what age would you go to, and what would you say?
Oh, goodness. I think my whole career up to this point, I feel really grateful that I've gone through those experiences. I would have been very happy not to go through the negative ones, but we are human and it is life. I would say I would probably go back to the 15-year-old me and just try to breathe. Because I think there was so much, especially becoming a teenager, again, dealing with some family stuff, being able to kind of take a step back and be like, it's going to be okay. You do have opportunities. You're going to figure this out. Because I was definitely in a rush to I wanted to be an adult. I wanted my own place. I wanted to get out of the house. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is just breathe, take it a day at a time. And yeah, try to find some peace in those moments.
Yeah, I think that's applicable even now.
Absolutely.
I was just like, oh yeah, I should breathe.
Drink some water, take a breath. Yes.
Yeah. We're always rushing, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than being in this present now moment and basking in it, because that's truly all that exists. Yet our brains want us to live in this state of hypnosis of in the forward, the future, or, in the past. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and driven and ambitious women, especially, I feel like we pay the highest price because we constantly are going, and nothing is given to us, at least in very rare circumstances is it given to us. So we work really hard, and there are things that we do sacrifice to find those accomplishments or to follow our mission and to address the things that we're trying to help support.
I think that's such a good point. I'm curious, what do you think is most often sacrificed?
Relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially romantic relationships. I think those tend to suffer more. Again, maybe that comes back to more of like a traditional relationship model, but I feel like relationships, whether it's your family, friends, love, like romantic, right? Because there's so much that you're plugging into, and you might be working late nights, you might be getting up really early. Your focus is going to be there. And I feel like there isn't necessarily a ton of room for there to be other, whether that's you creating other or others around you appreciating and understanding and being a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a whole conversation to
It
have,
absolutely
right?
is.
And there,
Yes.
there's just so much out there now as far as like options and how to live your life and choices, right? And I don't think, my personal opinion, that there's any one model that
Yeah.
fits. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
all kind of have to figure that out. So if you're out there and you're watching social media or some form of content is being preached at you and that doesn't feel right for you, no, that doesn't have to be your path, right? And I've tried many different like traditional types of paths, and I just know I'm like, this unicorn is not meant to fit into this little box. And it sounds like you, Jess, have 100% just continued to form your own path and make way for others. And I just think that's so phenomenal.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Yes, it's definitely it's had its fair share of challenges, but I really do kind of relish where I'm at now, even amongst some of the chaos and the lack of structure I might feel in this moment. There's so much that I've been able to create and build, and of course, my amazing team with Pivot Higher Plus, and of course, our partners. Even, I mean, I talked to a woman yesterday. She has her own safety gear equipment for women, actually. And both of us were kind of like in awe of each other, but also having this conversation of like, we are continuing to meet all these other women and fantastic humans who are just finally like, enough is enough. We're just going to do this and we're going to make it a reality.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beautiful thing, especially when people come together, but especially when women come together, change forms, right? Like power, we are the creators, right? With talking about like creating beings, but also like the most powerful creative energy comes from the feminine womb, in my opinion. And like if you bring us all together, cool. Let's build. And I love that networking is continuing to grow and expand, and you are all taking steps forward. It seems so vital for these industries. So in conclusion, is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't touched on?
Oh, goodness. No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of things. I would just encourage and invite folks, if you're interested in reading about my story, right, you can check out my website, thetruthaboutbeingawomaninconstruction.com. Or if you find yourself needing some additional support, whether you're interested in getting into the trades or changing careers or just feeling a little stuck, period, check us out at pivothigher.coach. I mean, we're definitely happy to help share our resources and be that safe space to talk.
Amazing. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into this episode. And thank you, Jessica, for being here. It's a true honor. And just a reminder to everyone, you'll be able to find that information and the links in the show notes. So thank you so much, my dear. I love chatting with you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on here and to share and connect. It was amazing.
Absolutely.